Good afternoon. This is Jessica Hamby. I'm wanting to share my case study for EDL 853, Get This Child Out of My Room. When looking at this case, I really felt that it was very real to me and some of the dealings that I've been involved with in our school. Though we have principals and assistant principals and a lot of support in place, we are part of a cooperative, and I know how that can really impact things. But what do I know about the problem is that Carl's behavior has changed, and Carl's parents are involved in a very bitter divorce, and he is witnessing their interactions. I also know that Carl's mom is working over 50 hours a week, and he isn't seeing his dad, and that really can impact a child. Susan is a newer teacher to the building, and that always presents challenges in gaining respect of other teachers and trying to fill the shoes of a teacher that didn't seem to really follow the proper procedures in working with students. Nancy, the classroom teacher, has a very negative attitude, and she seems to have given up, isn't very flexible, and the parents are supportive but don't seem to care at this point. They're very self-centered in working on what's going on at home for themselves, or and I don't know, not necessarily working on it, but being involved in what's going on. What I want to know here is the behavior is result of Carl's disability. Like we've talked about before in this class, that's very important in deciding what's best plan to move forward. Though he does have some behavior, they have changed, and it really does seem to be the result of the divorce, not so much his disability. What does the law say about this when we talk about suspensions, things like that? If it is not a result of his disability and it's putting other students at risk, as well as staff members, it's possible that we look into some alternate placements, as we viewed in one of our modules earlier on. However, I feel like there should be a time period where the team gets on the same base and works towards Carl and gives him some support to see if it can be effective prior to doing that. And who is finally responsible for holding Nancy, the teacher, accountable? Susan seems to be taking all the right steps without any buy-in or support other than the assistant superintendent, and superintendent, which aren't really there and present. And that makes it hard for Susan to implement the plan. The problem then, Nancy is not supportive of the team's decision regarding Carl, and a solution must be met for the best interest of students, especially Carl. She has to be brought on board, and her attitude needs to be changed to ensure Carl's well-being and the success of the plan. First, I would communicate frequently, and I really looked at this plan from Susan's perspective, as well as if I was the superintendent. I would try to communicate, and this is almost an emergency type of situation that requires my presence more. I would try everything I could to get her on board with the situation and understand the child. And it might be through being in there more, giving her resources, videos to view, for professional development. It might be more support in the classroom through paras, checking in, things like that. Again, the support from the administrator must be present. As an administrator trying to hold Nancy accountable, I would try to ask for communication from her, whether it be through documentation of the daily goings on or documentation of steps she's taking to build a relationship with Carl. But again, it seems that training needs to be taken place on the laws and understanding the disabilities that children may have. But beyond that, because there's plenty of students that do not have a disability that might have behaviors like this when they're going through a crisis or a trauma at home. And I would have a backup plan. What if this doesn't work? What is our next steps? Like we talked about, another meeting, possibly moving this child to a classroom with a teacher that is more flexible and open to trying things out. looking for outside support, resources such as a mental health program or the school counselor, things like that. Some of my plan of action bleeds over into my resolution when talking about the documentation. I think the documentation here will identify the triggers and it will really look for patterns. You can observe a lot, but when you don't write down what's happening, who's involved, what time of the day, is it a verbal outburst, is it a physical outburst, it's really hard to make decisions without hard data. And the team needs to come back together frequently to evaluate the effectiveness of this. It will hold everybody accountable there. Implementing relationship building activities is something that I've done in my own classroom. And it's very successful to coming to a resolution with children struggling with some trauma at home. It could be informal lunches with just Nancy and Carl, or Nancy, Susan, and Carl, Nancy, Susan, Carl, and a peer that seems to influence Carl in a positive way in the same classroom or in another classroom of different grade level, things like that. But Nancy really needs to have some empathy here too. I would celebrate any small successes from Nancy's end to Carl's end, and as a team to just keep everybody eyes towards the end goal for Carl. Debriefing this, I feel frustrated with Nancy's negative attitude and willingness to be flexible. Being a teacher in a position like this, many, many times myself, I have felt that I haven't been supported, or that I've tried everything I can do and it's time for help. So, that stuff needs to be taken care of before it gets to this point. I value my teachers and the other students, and I want them to be both safe and respected. So it's a fine line and balance there. I feel empathy for the family. I know it's a difficult time. I have students going through divorce. My parents were divorced. Of course, I was older in my 20s, but it does have an impact on your emotions and your daily interactions with people. I value flexibility on the part of everyone. In situations like this, it's got to have patience and sometimes a little trial and error to get students and staff through this. I do value the other student safety. I do not want Carl in the classroom where he could harm others. And I think Susan took the right approach on this in implementing a plan where he's removed. And I even like that there is a male there to help because of his size. And I also feel helpless with the lack of resources present. Where you're working with a cooperative, or you're in a position like this team where you don't have people there every single day, you don't have necessarily a building principal, you really are kind of thrown out to the wolves, and it takes even stronger communication and teamwork to get through things like this. Really frustrated with the staff's attitude and the prior special ed teacher and how they would have just put him in detention. And we all know how that would have been detrimental and the wrong approach. As far as effective and efficient management in this case, communication is key often and early before it got to this point. I know that sometimes it can happen quickly, but just being a good communicator helps. Following the laws and changing the IEP and the student placement is important. I think Susan took all the right steps in saying, hey, we can't make changes without parents present, and we need to think of least restrictive environment and the rights of Carl in this situation. I think they did a pretty good job here. Relationship building is very powerful in all cases like this, because for Carl, it seems he's looking for any relationship. And even the smallest interactions can help him in the classroom. Respectful leadership is important here, that we respect that Nancy seems to be just very at her wit's end, and the family deserves respect, Carl, but the respectful leadership also needs to have expectations and modeling and non-negotiables, where we can compromise and we can work together, but in the end, we're going to follow the IEP and we're going to ensure Carl's safety and his academic learning. Staff training has got to occur. I know that money in this situation is tight, but there are ways, whether it be through videos or watching other teachers teach, that can help shift the attitudes. And really, I feel like Nancy and Susan. Susan not so much, but Nancy needs to look into other situations similar to figure out what has worked for other educators. In promoting the academic learning of the students, we are ensuring the safety. The new plan ensures that if Carl is having an outburst that seems to be not safe for the staff or students, that he is removed, but he's also kept safe, and that helps not disrupt the learning time. Carl also needs to feel settled before he can learn. If he is in a red zone and he really feels that he's having an outburst or an emotion, he's not going to learn, not until it's settled. So that's important here. And how we handle this situation, we're promoting teamwork and collaboration, and that's modeled for students. Students see more than we think they see, and they understand more than we think they understand. And how we handle this speaks volumes about our character as a staff. And again, relationship building. I should have put that one first. It is promoted in every aspect for this conflict resolution because of the kids. The end goal is that we get Carl through this time and back to where he was moving forward. And that should be the goal of everybody here. So as far as the standards, I think through this whole situation, everyone on the team should have been reviewing the procedures and practices. Everything from academic to social, equality and acceptance, respect here is important. I brought it up several times. And his social and academic well-being are at stake. And there's a two-way communication in every aspect of this, from Carl to the staff, Carl to his family to the staff, and the staff to staff. And so everybody has to keep that in mind and step out and view this as best you can from the outside looking in to help here. As far as the technology standards, collaborating here, collecting and analyzing data as I talked about, and looking at the results, evaluating the effectiveness of this plan, and is important for both the staff and the students to move forward. And everybody has to be on the same page here for Carl and to have the best outcome for all. So this is a tough case. Unfortunately, it's one I've been involved in. I've been on the successful end of things most times here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Thank you.